Hello, everybody, and welcome. I'm Cyrix, this is Soul, and this is On the Shelf's Fave 5.
We're bringing you our favorite 5 games from the Switch. We're going to go back and forth, each of us explaining from number 5 all the way to number 1, the games that we like the most.
And now we can just get right into our lists. All right, jumping into my list at number 5 is going to be Am Setsuna. And it's a surprise. This one is one I might get some slack on. For those not in the know, I generally don't import games, but this one was actually the game that started my collecting off. So maybe I'm blinded a little bit by the game because I bought it before I even had the system, but I really can't help it because I think the box art is some of the cleanest, simplest, and most beautiful art I've seen. And I think the story's intriguing. I think the characters are well-rounded, though I would like a little bit more fleshing out of the main character. The game has a special place in my heart, so maybe I have my blinders on, but it is a decently solid RPG. I know plenty of people call it boring, but you can't please everybody. The combat system is solid, including a nice combo system that pushes the necessity to experiment with group composition. And some of the bosses are super challenging and fun. It's just well-rounded, and personally, I find it to be a solid RPG experience.
I Am Setsuna, huh? Because here, all right, I liked I Am Setsuna for about 5 hours. And then I realized that it was the same game just over and over and over again. I wanted to like it more, but I didn't.
Yeah. I mean, it's not for everybody. It's very, I mean, if you break it down, it's kind of cookie cutter, and I get that. But I don't.
Well, I agree. I agree with some of the things that you said. Like the box art is great. I do like that, and I do commend Tokyo RPG Factory for kind of being one of those early attempts at bringing something like this over. We never really got a proper version of this on the ESRB, so everybody had their import, which ultimately is just the Sero version from Japan. Even if you got the English cover, it's still the Japanese cartridge with just a piece of paper taped over the front of the cover. But it's still a nice piece of artwork, and there are parts of the game that I enjoyed. So I agree with some of what you're saying, but I just felt it was way slow.
Well, this is my Fave 5, so.
Okay. I know, but you want me to share my thoughts on it.
100%.
Just like you're gonna share your thoughts
I'm ready
on
to crap all over your choices too. So that's.
Yes, absolutely. Speaking of choices, my number 5 is Axiom Verge. There's no mistaking what Axiom Verge tries to be. There is also no mistaking that it succeeds in its mission to do so. From the moment the game starts to the ending, there's very little. The work that Thomas Happ put in to make this game and the amount of fan love that he has for Metroid is very apparent. And if you were to reskin and rescript this game, it would fit right into the Metroid canon. On the Switch, Axiom Verge received this wonderful Multiverse Edition at a very reasonable $10 more than the standard edition. The Multiverse Edition included the game, a nice booklet with that art and developer commentary, a double-sided mini poster, a soundtrack CD, and a documentary Blu-ray disc. I felt like the entire package was simply a fantastic value. And on top of all of that, the game was great. It felt like I was playing classic Metroid.
I agree with that. And Axiom Verge is on my list. That's one that I figured we would both have. Axiom Verge is on my list, though it's a little bit higher. But yeah, I completely agree with everything you're saying. Especially a lot of what you're saying is actually in my breakdown of the game too. So we'll get to that here in a little bit, but completely agree. Axiom Verge is one of those games that I suggest to just about everybody who asks me what they should buy on the Switch. And I've convinced at least 3 people to buy the game, and they've all come back and told me that they loved it.
I mean, you do have to be a fan of Metroid games to kind of like this. It's so much like Metroid that if you were to stray from that, if you're not a fan of Metroid, you're not going to like this either. So I really enjoyed the game. I'll just say that. I put a lot of time into it, and I felt that the value proposition was high for the multiverse edition, combining the quality of the game with that. I think I got every penny worth of fun out of that.
For sure, yeah. I did. So you beat the game, I'm assuming.
Of course, yes.
Yeah. I actually have a friend of mine that I convinced to buy it. He actually he beat it, and so did I. But he actually has a higher percentage than I did. So
I'm going to tell you that every game on my list I have beaten. That is one of the common themes of my list.
Looking at mine, my next game that we'll get to in a minute, it doesn't really have a beat per se, but we'll get to that in a little bit.
That's fair.
Why don't we
get to mine? Yeah, why don't we get to my next one? Coming in at number 4 on my list is Tiny Barbarian DX, and I'm going to tell you that's probably not a surprise to anybody that it's on the list.
I'm surprised it is not on mine.
I am a big fan of difficult platformers and good pixel art, and it's a good thing that both are combined in this game. Tiny Barbarian DX was one of my early loves for the Switch. The game has a really nice balance of difficult action platforming and retro callbacks. The only area of the game that I want to call out negatively in any way is the very final boss. The difficulty spike at the final boss is tremendous and unbalanced. If you thought the game was difficult up until that point, you've got another thing coming. That being said, it is still one of the most fun, challenging platformers I've played on the Switch. The game itself started as a freeware title available for Windows. In fact, if you finish each of the chapters on the cart, you unlock the original game, which can then be played on your Switch. This title was one of Nicholas's earliest Switch games, but definitely has a nicely put together package. The cover is reversible, which I think is great. There's a instruction manual, a pouch, and a keychain. I wouldn't, however, recommend this to just anyone, but if you're up for a challenge, it's absolutely a worthy game.
It is definitely a challenge. I haven't beaten it, though I do intend to beat it. I am on episode 3. I'm on the second trip up the tower, the spinning tower. So
that level with all the Castlevania callbacks and
yeah,
tremendous.
Yeah, it's great, and I'm enjoying it. Once I got past the B boss in episode 2, the game got a little bit easier for me. For some reason, I got stuck there for a while, but once I got past that, the game got easier for me until the point that I'm at, and it's one of those games that I'll play for a while, and then when I get angry at it, I'll set it down, and then I'll come back to it in like a couple weeks, and everything, I forget why I'm mad at it, and then I remember shortly thereafter why I was mad at it. It's definitely a solid game, and you are correct when you say that it is not for everybody.
No, it's definitely not. I love that level of challenge when it comes to a platformer, because if the game is good enough, I just am determined. It kind of pulls something out of me that makes me want to do it. It's, both of us played a ton of Mario Maker, and there were levels that did that to me, where people would bring me a level on stream, and I would just keep hammering at it, probably longer in some cases than some people wanted me to. But when you like a level so much, or when you like a game so much, then you're just determined. And so that's what that game was to me. I think I had multiple days in a row, where I would just put hours into this thing with the final boss, trying to beat it day after day after day, and finally figured it out. But I don't know. I just thought it was a ton of fun for being super challenging. I'm curious to what you have for number 4.
My number 4 is Blade Strangers. And I feel like this one might be a surprise to a lot of people, because there's definitely some balance concerns to deal with. But as far as fighting games go, it's the one that I've had the most fun with. DB Fighters could and might possibly overthrow that for me, but as it stands right now, Blade Strangers is my favorite fighter on the Switch. And I just wish there was more fighters to choose from, but I sank so many nights and so many hours into playing that game, and it's also partially responsible for me buying and modifying an 8-bit DOE in30 fight stick.
True.
So I can't really praise it enough. It's definitely, it came out of left field too, because it's, it was Nicholas's first foray into the fighting genre, and they got a lot of guest appearances for characters in there. So it really it really ticked a lot of boxes that people didn't think it would, and it's very simple. The control scheme is very simple. It was just surprised me, and I really enjoyed it enough to put it on this list, because it's one that I go back to, because I played it for several hours with you. I played it for several hours with a couple other people from the Discord. I played online. I went through all of the tutorial stuff where you have to do the different combos with each character. I think there's only like 4 missions that I haven't completed. It's all around been a really fun game for me.
I enjoyed it. I felt that a lot of the gameplay, the controls, the characters, the missions, the bouts that you and I had against each other were a lot of fun. I also agree with what you said about the selection of fighting games on the Switch. Now, granted, we just saw Smash come out, and there's a lot of positive about Smash, but Blade Strangers was kind of a neat addition to that realm. It has its uniqueness. It has its own kind of what it brings to the genre. So I like a lot of what you said there.
Yeah, and Smash is definitely a really great game, but it's not a traditional fighter for me, whereas Blade Strangers is very much a traditional arcade fighter. Mm-hmm. And that's what I really loved about that. But now I'll transition over to my number 3, which is another one that I am fairly certain that we're going to overlap on. I don't know where on your list it'll be. Maybe it'll also be 3. But that is Mario Odyssey. And this one, I definitely feel we're going to overlap. But it's definitely in my top 3 Marios of all time. It's definitely the best I've played since Mario 64, though I have not played Galaxy, and I have very little playtime in Sunshine, admittedly. But it's one of those must-own titles that will undoubtedly be the best Mario on the system, unless they decide to do an Odyssey 2 in the future, which I could honestly see them doing, considering how long they expect the Switch's life to be. So this is what Nintendo does best, platforming. And between the beautiful level design, the amazing control scheme, this one is going to be hard for anybody to developmentally pass. So the fact that it's that deep, and yet the game is simple enough for just about anybody to pick up and play, it harkens back to the whole, used to buy a Nintendo and it would come with a Mario game. Like, at this point, you buy a Switch and you have to have Odyssey, is basically what I'm getting down to.
I will tell you right now, and this is probably one of the more shocking things, Odyssey is not on my list. I know.
So many hours into that game.
I made a conscious decision to leave Odyssey and Breath of the Wild out of my discussion. And the reason I did that was there are so many other great games that don't always get the press. They don't always get the attention for things like this. So I made a conscious decision not to include it. That being said, I agree with everything you said about it. I think that Odyssey is a fantastic game, and had I included it on my list, had I not consciously chose to take it out of my list, because it was on my long list, it just wasn't on my short list, for that reason. Had I left it on there, I'm certain it would be somewhere in this top 5. But I decided very much so not to. But I think you're right on all accounts. Now,
all right, well then what did you have for your 3?
That comes down to something that came a bit out of nowhere. I had no expectation of what this game would be. I did not. I just got hyped for it in the kind of the last minute and decided to play it. My number 3 is Yoku's Island Express. Now, who would have thought that a Metroidvania / pinball combination could be nearly as much fun as Yoku's Island Express? Not only was the gameplay surprisingly cohesive and far less frustrating than you'd imagine, the story and the characters were absolutely charming. The length of the game was just right, in my opinion. A lot like Odyssey, because you don't have to complete the whole thing if you want. You can go front to back on story with Odyssey, just like you can on Yoku's Island, in a much more manageable amount of time. So I felt like the length of the game was just right. I was able to squeeze completion of this game in between a few other titles, and it felt like it was just the perfect size for the type of game that it was. And also, the artwork for the game was simply outstanding. I mean, you talk about every frame of painting. Yoku's was truly a delightful experience, and I was pleasantly surprised to play it.
Yeah, Yoku's is one of the ones that caught me off guard. I thought about putting Yoku's on my list. There was just so many other games that I would go back to before I would go back to Yoku's. But Yoku's was definitely fun. Definitely everything that you said about it is true. It very endearing kind of character setup. The story isn't super, in depth, but you didn't have to be, because it's just the way the game is.
No, it's light. It's charming.
Yeah, and then you have the story. You can complete the story mode from A to B and you're good, or you can go back and there's collectibles to get. There's mail to deliver.
Yeah,
so
I mean, there's all kinds of little things to fill up that time, right?
Yeah, I played most of my Yoku's was played on lunch at work, and I found it hard to put it down a couple times.
I was going to say, playing it at work would be tough, because every time you'd probably feel like you were just getting into the groove, lunch would be over.
Yeah, that's pretty much how it went with Yoku. Like Smash, I can play 1 or 2 games during lunch and it's fine, but Yoku's, I would get to a point where it's like, I want to keep going, but I need to put this down.
Yeah, I think I played that for just a few days straight to just play through it. It might not even been more than 2 days, and I was done. But it was perfect. It was just the right length.
Yeah.
Going up to my number 2.
I feel like I know where your 2 and 1 are going to be, but we'll see how right I am.
Well, you might. Number 2 for me was Battle Chasers Night War.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I figured that was going to be your 1 or 2.
Now, I had been looking forward to playing that for quite a long time. Joe Madureira's work on the comic book series was amazing, and I really wanted to see how that material would translate over to the video game world. And I know we've talked about Battle Chasers rather extensively in our one-shot, so I won't go down that path too far, but it's an extremely solid game for a Kickstarter project, although that seems to be, kind of improving all the time. We see Kickstarters just doing better and better and better. This game, to me, gets the JRPG play style right, but it adds some additional elements of combat into the mix, which was very refreshing. Overcharge adds points to the mana bars, which was really helpful at times when mana got really low. And there was also that burst meter, which had some really cool actions that the characters could choose from based on the level of burst. Much like number 3, with Yoku's Island Express, Battle Chasers Night War, I felt was a great game length. And I even took the time to be a completionist on that game. The game has stuck with me. It's in my head. I greatly enjoyed it. I felt like for a turn-based JRPG style game, it just nailed everything. And I really hope that Airship Syndicate returns to the world of Battle Chasers for a sequel.
A lot of the guys that worked on Battle Chasers have worked on a few other games that I would like to see being brought to the Switch, but Battle Chasers is definitely a game that I could see getting a sequel. A lot of the people who worked on Battle Chasers, I feel like there's some other games that they had hands in, like Joe Madureira had part in Darksiders. I'd like to really see that come to the Switch as well, but I could hold off on that if he gave me another Battle Chasers game. I could sink my teeth into another Battle Chasers game. I didn't play all the way through like you did, but I did get far enough in to know that it is a game that I'm going to go back to. And one of the elements that they added that I really enjoyed was the difficulty selection for the different dungeons. It kind of gave it almost like an MMO feel, where you could do like a heroic version or a mythic version of the dungeon and get better loot from it. I thought that was really a nice touch, and I agree with you, and I figured it was going to be on your list because you spent so much time in it.
Well, consider how many different people, especially on the Discord, but even through other means, saw what I was saying about the game, decided to give it a run, and were pleasantly surprised with what they played.
Yeah, there was a lot of discussion about that game as a result of you talking about it. I know that.
I mean, I think it just goes to show what a great job the Airship Syndicate guys did with that game, when so many people could pick it up and just immediately be immersed and enjoy it. A lot of people really just said, wow, yeah, this is better than I expected, and I'm going to keep playing. So,
my number 2 is a game that you've already said, and that's Axiom Verge.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's an overlapping title. It's you said it's a spiritual successor to Metroid. It's pretty much all you need to say to pique anybody's attention. But it is so much more than that. It's definitely a labor of love for the developer, and it shows. The game's visually stunning. It plays super smooth. Story's enough to pay attention to and drive you if you really like story-based games. But the game is also simple enough, and the story is simple enough that you can ignore it and just get to the action if you want to. It caters to speedrunners by offering special seated and timed mode, which is a nice touch. But something else the game has that a lot shoot for and miss, and you touched on this, is it has a special edition that is legitimately worth the extra coin.
Absolutely.
And it wasn't marked up much higher than the standard, and it included all those nice bonus add-ons, including the Blu-ray documentary, which showcased the making of the game. So there's not really much else I can really add to that. It is definitely there's a reason why it's on both of our lists, obviously.
Yeah, the game just hits a lot of high notes for anybody that is interested in the original Metroid or Super Metroid or a number of other similar titles, and it does every bit of justice that the originals did.
All right, now we're getting into our number ones. And based on what the rest of my list is and what I've always talk about when I talk about Switch games, do you have an idea of what my number 1 is?
Yes.
All right, what do you think it is?
And I think it's a fairly recent title.
What do you think it is?
I think it is Mutant Football League. Or is that Mutant League Football? I can't quite remember which one is which.
Well, it's not that. But now that you mention it, I probably could have found a place for that on my list, though I like my list. If I were to cut Odyssey for the same reason you did, MFL would definitely have made my
the
list. Yeah. So, no.
So I'm curious as to what you have for number 1.
My number 1 is Knights of Azure 2. And it's an odd one. You got to look past the fan service. If you're a fan of anime plot and storytelling, this game has it in spades, but it also has a nice, easy assistant system with the lilies. It has a neat pet type system with the servants, and they actually level up and evolve with you. The level design is nice with simple puzzles that everyone loves getting loot. It does have your cheesy lovey-dovey undertones, and it's a hack and slash that's definitely not for everyone, but this is my fave 5, not yours, so shut up. But I don't really have much else I can really say about it. It's one of those games that's going to be hit or miss for most people. A lot of people are going to overlook it because they're going to be like, oh, it's just fan service, or oh, it's so anime. But I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the storyline. Of course, I'm a fan of a lot of anime, so maybe that helps digest it a little bit for me. But I really enjoyed it. I thought the storyline was really endearing, and then it has replay value because once you beat the game, the clock stops because the entire game you're behind a clock that you have to complete these different areas and different episodes before the clock reaches a time at which point the world is going to be engulfed in this darkness by the queen, the moon queen. So it is a phenomenal game to me. In fact, it may have been the second or third game I played all the way through when I got my Switch. I know it was a game I played after I beat Retro City Rampage. So it may be the third game I played from start to finish, and I enjoyed it.
I was going to say, I do remember it being fairly early on in what you were playing on the Switch.
Yeah, it was Odyssey. I believe I beat Odyssey and Retro City Rampage, and then played this. Maybe I did this before Retro City, but it was definitely in the early stages for when I was playing on the Switch, for sure.
I am not going to have anything to add to your number one pick, simply because I put about 15 minutes into that game and put it away. It just was not a game that I was going to continue to play. Not because I thought it was bad or didn't want to. It just was something where I probably was not going to play it. So I had other games that I was going to play, and I don't really have anything I can add to put on top of what you've said for your number one. Interesting choice to be a number one. Interesting choice.
It was definitely, I don't know. I didn't put it on there to trip you up any. It's just it literally was a game that it caught me off guard. It was literally a game that I went in not expecting much from it, and for some reason I just really enjoyed it. And they're talking about doing a third one. So Koei Tecmo, if you're gonna do a third one, it'd be really nice if you could bring the first one over, as well. It'd be kind of nice. But
if they did that, I'd imagine that would be an eShop only thing.
Yeah. Well, if they did a physical of 3 with a code for 1, I'd be okay with that too. That's probably the only time I'm ever okay with a code. But the game got really good reviews.
Sure.
It has a specific audience. It really does. And it's if you're not a huge anime fan, there are plenty of other games to play besides this one. And I figured you didn't put much time into it, so it's completely okay.
Yeah,
it's not for
just
everybody.
Not one that I was planning on playing. But maybe after that glowing review, maybe I'll give it another look. I am far more predictable on my number one choice, and I'm not even going to give you a chance to guess because I know you probably already figured out what it is.
Go ahead and tell us about why it is, because I already.
Well, what can I say about my top choice that hasn't already been said by tons of people already? I mean, it did win Best Action Game at the Game Awards recently.
I don't remember Troll and I winning Best Action Game.
You weren't watching the same show I was then. Chicken Range. Oh wait, no, not Chicken Range. Dead Cells. Motion Twin did the roguelite and Metroidvania genres a giant favor by putting this out. This game is perfectly frustrating, has a metric ton of great weapons, and simply feels amazing to play. You can speed through it and try to get to each of the time doors if you're into that, or just crush enemies one after the other. The difficulty level on this is through the roof when it comes to certain bosses, though I am so glad that I finally beat the Hand of the King, the game's final boss. Dead Cells is simply an amazing experience, and that doesn't even begin to factor in how beautiful the game is. Overall, Dead Cells ticks so many boxes for me with the pixel art, a Metroidvania, action platforming, etc. It's a top-notch game that deserved the award and is my number one choice.
Yeah, and I definitely, when you said Battle Chasers was number 2, I knew that Dead Cells had to be your number 1. It is rage-inducing. It does it so well.
Like I said, ticks so many boxes.
So well. I mean, it's like Tiny Barbarians and Dark Souls had like a baby. It's like a game that angers me greatly, but I can't stop playing it. It is definitely deserving of the award that it won, for sure. And then on top of that, it also got a pseudo special edition treatment in that you could get a signature edition of it.
Right.
So there is that, but that's not something you could pick up at a store. It's something you had to specially order. But it is a great game. It's not one of those ones that caught me off guard because I kind of knew what it was going into it because I had followed it for a while. I'd watched it on Steam, and it was one that I anticipated playing and enjoying, and I did. Obviously, I have not beat the Hand of the King. I don't know that I've beaten a single boss, to be honest, but I've gotten to one a couple of times. I know, but
the concierge is the first boss. He's the one that's on the bridge.
I've definitely gotten to him a couple times, and I've gotten close to beating him a couple times. So it is definitely a great game, and I'll play through it some more because it's one of those games that you have to die to progress. So
yes,
it is 100% intended that you're going to face wall bosses for a while.
Yeah, there are. If you play roguelites, you must simply mentally get beyond the fact that you will die over and over and over. It's a core part of the game. It's how you progress. Dying no longer is necessarily punishment. There are punishing aspects about dying when you are playing, but it is not a punishment. It is progression, because every time you die, you have gained something, whether that something is a part of the game that stays with you, knowledge about enemies, gained experience, something that betters your character, whatever it is. You've unlocked something, whatever that is, even if it's just the knowledge of how to potentially better face an enemy that you just died from, you gain something. And so, as a player of roguelites, you must make peace with that and embrace it. More so than make peace. You have to embrace the idea that you're going to die and you're going to do better the next time. And this game does that so well. I know a lot of people I've spoken to that once I've explained what the game is to those people that aren't familiar, it's one of two reactions. It's either, oh, that sounds terrible. Why would I want to die over and over and over? Or they're intrigued. They're now in a space where they want to do something. They want to make something of that. And Dead Cells is so rewarding when you do learn things and gain things, such as new weapons and you face new enemies, that there's something to the quality of what they've built. And on top of that, once you do beat those bosses, the satisfaction you have from finally doing that is so high. You just want to keep going until you face that next wall.
Yeah, I definitely couldn't have said that better myself. And it's gonna bring us to the end of this. So what we can do real quick is we'll give a quick rundown again of our lists. So for my list, I had number 5 was Am Setsuna, number 4 was Blade Strangers, number 3 was Mario Odyssey, number 2 is Axiom Verge, and number 1 is Knights of Azure 2.
My number 5 was Axiom Verge. Number 4 was Tiny Barbarian DX. Number 3 was Yoku's Island Express. Number 2 was Battle Chasers Night War. And number 1, Dead Cells. We appreciate you checking out our favorite 5. Tell us about your favorite 5. What are your top 5 favorite games on the Nintendo Switch?
You can leave us a comment down in the comment section letting us know. And you can also critique about how good or bad our lists were. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button if you haven't already done so. Hit that bell so you get notified whenever we upload new videos.
Thank you for listening, and we'll catch you on the next video.
See you soon.